What kind of military officer deliberately defies direct orders from the highest political command, relieves an allied general in the middle of a ferocious battle, and ignites a major international diplomatic crisis, all while orchestrating one of the most crucial and life-saving victories in American military history? The answer is a legend called Howlin Mad Smith, better known by his fearsome moniker, Howlin Mad Smith. This is not merely the story of a hard-charging general, but a profound examination of leadership, sacrifice, and the moral complexity of command in wartime. In the summer of 1944, as Allied forces prepared for the largest amphibious assault ever conceived in the Pacific, one man's absolute willingness to defy authority would determine whether thousands of young Americans would survive the brutal campaign. Smith's narrative pivots on a core philosophical object, a tactical doctrine he meticulously developed through sheer willpower, relentless determination, and the grim lessons learned from military disaster. This blueprint would ultimately redefine how America fought in the Pacific, becoming the foundation for the island-hopping strategy that helped secure victory in World War II. Before achieving that legendary status, however, this doctrine and the convictions of its architect nearly destroyed Smith's entire career, culminating in one of the most controversial command decisions in the annals of military history. Howlin Mad Smith was born on April 20th, 1882, in Hatchetchee, Alabama, into a world where military tradition ran deeper than the deepest Southern roots. Named after a Confederate chaplain, his life seemed destined for a path far removed from the coral reefs and volcanic beaches of the Pacific. Yet, by 1944, this son of the South would stand as the architect of America's most audacious campaigns, having earned the nickname that defined both his fiery temperament and his enduring legacy. Smith's ascent through the ranks was powered by an obsession that bordered on mania, the science of amphibious warfare. While many of his contemporaries focused on the traditional strategies of land battles, Smith dedicated himself to dissecting military history. He studied the disastrous Gallipoli campaign, meticulously analyzing every failed beach landing across time, concluding that the Marine Corps had to completely reimagine its approach to combat. This relentless pursuit of perfection in amphibious operations made him indispensable to the Pacific War effort, yet simultaneously rendered him insufferable to many of his colleagues in both the Army and Navy. What elevates Smith's story from a biography of a tough soldier to a profound study of moral courage is the impossible decision he faced in June 1944, staring down the heavily fortified island of Saipan. With over 15,000 American lives hanging in the balance, Smith chose to trust his hard-won experience over his direct orders, violating every principle of the rigid military chain of command. The repercussions of that single choice, to prioritize the lives of his men over the dictates of Washington, would echo through the halls of the Pentagon and across the ravaged beaches of the Pacific, forever altering the way America viewed leadership and the true definition of victory in wartime. Smith's education in warfare did not originate in the hallowed halls of military academies, but in the gruesome, muddy trenches of France during World War I. As a young Marine officer, he was a first-hand witness to the catastrophic failures of frontal assaults launched against prepared enemy positions. While his peers saw only carnage and senseless slaughter, Smith saw lessons. He meticulously studied how inadequate reconnaissance led directly to wholesale slaughter, how German machine gun nests could decimate entire battalions in minutes, and how poor coordination between the different services consistently turned tactical advantages into strategic disasters. The experience that indelibly marked Smith's philosophy occurred during the Meuse-Argonne offensive, where he watched wave after wave of American doughboys charge blindly into blistering enemy fire. The senseless, systemic waste of human life burned itself into his consciousness, forging within him an almost pathological determination to never, under any circumstance, repeat such errors. This deeply held conviction led to his signature obsession: meticulous planning, overwhelming initial firepower, and absolute coordination among all military branches. After the Great War concluded, while most officers enjoyed relatively relaxed peacetime postings, Smith voluntarily stationed himself at Quantico. There, he transformed the Marine base into America's first serious training center dedicated entirely to amphibious warfare. Throughout the 1920s and 1930s, he conducted landing exercises that others dismissed as elaborate games. Smith viewed them as essential rehearsals for a war he knew was coming. His reputation rapidly grew among Marines, who respected his ferocious attention to detail, but he simultaneously earned the deep resentment of Army and Navy officers, who found his constant criticism of their established methods insufferable. By 1941, Smith had developed a revolutionary, comprehensive doctrine encompassing beach assaults, specialized landing craft, coordinated naval bombardment, close air support, and highly efficient logistics systems. While his theories seemed perfectly sound on paper, they had never faced the ultimate trial of combat. The devastating surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, however, provided that tragic test, immediately catapulting Smith from a relatively obscure training officer to the crucial role of commander of American amphibious operations in the Pacific. Smith's approach to amphibious warfare rested on three revolutionary concepts that directly challenged traditional military thinking. First, he insisted that successful beach landings demanded absolute unity of command. Smith argued that during the critical assault phase, one person must control all naval, air, and ground forces. This idea directly contradicted military tradition, which maintained a rigid separation, granting each service complete independence in its own operational domain. Smith argued that the sheer complexity and speed required for amphibious operations made such division suicidal. Second, Smith championed the doctrine of overwhelming initial violence, rejecting the outdated notion of gradual escalation. He advocated for a massive, concentrated bombardment followed immediately by a rapid, focused assault. His philosophy was deceptively simple. Hit the enemy so hard in the first hour that they never recover their ability to coordinate a defense. This aggressive strategy demanded unprecedented coordination among all services and required a massive commitment of resources, luxuries that traditional military planners were often reluctant to provide. Third, and perhaps most controversial, Smith believed that effective amphibious commanders must be willing to make battlefield decisions that contradict strategic orders from distant headquarters. He argued that the fluid, chaotic nature of beach warfare rendered distant command utterly impossible. Local commanders, Smith stressed, must retain the authority to adapt tactics in real time, even if those adaptations directly conflicted with overall strategic plans. These concepts fundamentally challenged the core structure of American military command, which historically emphasized rigid hierarchy and unwavering adherence to predetermined plans. Smith's ideas suggested that true success required flexibility, creativity, and a willingness to defy authority when circumstances dictated qualities that made him both invaluable and inherently dangerous to the military establishment. Smith's first major test came at Tarawa in November 1943, where his theories collided with the brutal reality of deeply entrenched Japanese defensive positions. The resulting assault on that tiny coral atoll became a devastating bloodbath that shocked the American public, costing over 3,000 casualties to capture an island smaller than New York's Central Park. Yet, Smith refused to view Tarawa as a failure. He saw it as an essential, brutal education. He meticulously analyzed every flaw, from the inadequate naval bombardment to the logistical nightmares with the landing craft. The lessons drawn from Tarawa led Smith to develop his most crucial innovation, the doctrine of flexible amphibious assault. This refined system emphasized multiple contingency plans, decentralized command authority, and the absolute necessity of real-time adaptation of tactics based directly on changing battlefield conditions. By early 1944, Smith had perfected his methods through campaigns in the Marshall Islands, where his updated techniques resulted in dramatically reduced casualty rates and much faster objective capture. His consistent success attracted the attention of the highest levels of military command, leading to his appointment as the commander of amphibious operations for Operation Forager, the massive assault on the Mariana Islands. The Marianas campaign targeting Saipan, Guam, and Tinian represented the most heavily fortified positions American forces had encountered up to that point. Success in this operation would open the direct path to Japan. Failure would extend the war by years and cost tens of thousands of additional lives. Smith knew his revolutionary methods would either definitively prove their worth or utterly destroy his career and potentially jeopardize the entire Pacific Campaign. The defining controversy of Smith's legacy began on June 15, 1944, as American forces stormed the beaches of Saipan. The island's defenses proved even more formidable than intelligence had suggested, and the initial assault quickly bogged down under withering Japanese fire. Army units, unfamiliar and uncomfortable with Smith's aggressive amphibious tactics, struggled to maintain momentum, and Navy commanders, frustrated by the slow progress, began openly questioning his battle plans. The true crisis erupted when Smith's superior, Admiral Raymond Spruance, ordered him to maintain the original, rigid timeline, regardless of the mounting casualties. Washington had strategically timed the Marianas operation to coincide with the ongoing Normandy invasion, and immense political pressure demanded quick, decisive results. Smith faced an impossible, agonizing choice: obey orders that he was certain would lead to catastrophic losses, or defy his superiors and risk a guaranteed court-martial. Smith's choice was history-making. He ignored Washington's timeline and, even more dramatically, he relieved Army General Ralph Smith, no relation, from command. This action immediately created the most serious inter-service crisis of the Pacific War. Army brass accused Holland Smith of completely exceeding his authority and undermining the necessary joint operations. Navy commanders worried deeply about the diplomatic implications of firing a respected Army general during active combat, and politicians in Washington feared the entire controversy would damage America's international reputation. Yet, Holland Smith's gamble paid off spectacularly. By taking the necessary time to properly coordinate his assault, he reduced projected casualties by an estimated 60%, while achieving all of his tactical objectives ahead of his revised extended schedule. The successful capture of Saipan not only opened the Marianas to American forces, but also provided vital bases for the B-29 bombing campaigns against the Japanese mainland. Smith's willingness to defy a direct order had potentially shortened the war and saved thousands of lives. The broader implications of Smith's actions raise profound questions about the nature of military command in a democratic society. If field commanders, armed with superior tactical expertise, are allowed to ignore orders from elected civilian leadership, what prevents the dangerous possibility of a military coup? Conversely, if distant politicians are permitted to casually override critical tactical decisions made by experienced battlefield commanders, how many more soldiers will die for political expediency or convenience? Smith's case violently highlighted the unavoidable tension between military expertise and civilian control that is the defining characteristic of democratic societies at war. His strongest supporters argued that his specialized, unmatched knowledge of amphibious warfare made him uniquely qualified, far more so than Washington bureaucrats, to make life-and-death battlefield decisions. His critics firmly contended that military officers must obey orders regardless of their personal opinions. Otherwise, democratic governance becomes impossible. The controversy also revealed the deep cultural fissures within the American military. Marines, with their proud tradition of improvisation and aggressive action, generally supported Smith's bold decision. Army officers, rigidly trained in systematic planning and strict hierarchy, viewed his actions as inexcusable insubordination. Navy commanders, caught miserably between the two services, struggled fiercely to maintain unity while managing competing tactical philosophies. The Howlin Mad Smith's legacy extends far beyond the beaches of Saipan. His willingness to defy authority in the relentless pursuit of tactical excellence established precedents that would influence American military doctrine for generations. The amphibious warfare techniques he developed became the standard operating procedures for conflicts ranging from Korea to Iraq. His uncompromising emphasis on inter-service cooperation laid the critical groundwork for the modern joint operations that define 21st century warfare. Perhaps Smith's most important contribution was his powerful demonstration that effective leadership sometimes requires the moral courage to say no to authority. In an era where blind, unquestioning obedience was considered the highest military virtue, Smith proved that thoughtful, principled defiance could serve the greater good. His actions at Saipan showed that true patriotism might actually mean actively protecting soldiers from the potentially catastrophic consequences of poor decision-making, even when those poor decisions originate from the very highest levels of government. The moral complexity of Smith's story reflects the enduring challenges facing democratic societies engaged in warfare. How does a society effectively balance the necessity of civilian control of the military with the desperate need for tactical flexibility in the field? When should a field commander truly trust his extensive experience over direct orders from a distant headquarters? And, most difficult of all, how does history distinguish between principled defiance and dangerous insubordination? Smith's example suggests that these questions possess no simple, immediate answers. What truly matters is not blind, unquestioning adherence to rules, but the thoughtful application of profound principles in service of a larger goal. Smith's ultimate goal was always the preservation of American lives and the flawless achievement of military objectives. When those fundamental goals came into direct conflict with orders issued from Washington, he decisively chose to serve the men under his command, rather than the distant politicians above him. Today, as American forces face complex, asymmetrical challenges globally, Smith's legacy remains profoundly relevant. Modern conflicts demand the same rare combination of tactical expertise, moral courage, and absolute willingness to challenge established authority that Smith demonstrated on the beaches of Saipan. His story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest service one can render to their country requires the courage to disobey a flawed order, trust one's own exhaustive training, and accept the potentially dire consequences of doing what is morally right rather than what is merely commanded. Holland Smith died in 1967, his controversial career largely forgotten by a public that had swiftly moved on to new wars and new heroes. But within the Marine Corps, his legacy remains absolutely vital. It lives on in the doctrine that mandates every amphibious assault must be planned with meticulous care, executed with overwhelming force, and adapted with constant, real-time intelligence. Most importantly, his example teaches that true leadership means taking complete responsibility for the lives entrusted to your command, even when that responsibility conflicts with direct orders from above. The beaches of Saipan are now tranquil tourist destinations, offering no visible reminders of the desperate battle that once raged there. But the tactical innovations forged in blood and fire by that one stubborn Marine general continue to protect American lives in conflicts across the globe. Sometimes the greatest, most enduring victories are won, not by following orders, but by possessing the profound courage to ignore them when duty demands a higher loyalty. In the end, Howlin Mad Smith proved that in the brutal theater of war, and indeed, in life itself, the most important battles are often fought not against external enemies, but against the insidious internal pressure to conform, to obey, and to avoid the terrible responsibility of independent moral judgment. His legacy challenges every leader, military and civilian alike, to confront the hardest question of all. When the commands from above clash with the well-being and lives of those below, which loyalty truly serves the greater, more enduring good. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked the video, please subscribe and enjoy more stories in the future.